Warning, the following review is of a film that is rated R and has scenes that are graphic. Certain imagery may be desaturated, pixelated, or otherwise censored based on the editor's discretion. Viewer discretion is advised. I've officially become a gamer. And also apparently a mall ho. And if you'd like to be a mall ho, make sure to subscribe to Gerard Digital Video and follow me on all of my social media, or at least the ones in this cool graphic I made. Anyway, on to the video. Before we get into this review, I'd like to talk a little bit about my history with movie theaters. As a kid, seeing a movie in theaters was an event. I didn't see my first movie in theaters until I was 4 years old, as most kids should. Don't bring babies into theaters, they won't appreciate it and it's just going to ruin the experience for everyone else. But even after my first exposure to the silver screen, trips to theaters were very far and few between. If I were to see a movie in theaters, it would have to be because I really wanted to, my parents wanted to, or because my dad had a work party that for some reason included going to theaters and seeing Chicken Little. Also, there was this one time that I saw Fantastic Mr. Fox on a school field trip after reading the book in class. That movie, as the title would suggest, was fantastic. However, my dumb, stupid child brain would rather have seen Alvin and the Chipmunks the Squeakquel. As I said, dumb, stupid child brain. I saw both. Anyways, as I got older and day trips with my parents stopped being cool, movie theater trips became more far and few. In 2016, however, I discovered that you could watch movies with girls, and that changed my life. I'm gonna lower the mic. That will also change something. This kicked off a renaissance for not only my interest in theaters, but movies in general. As far as movies go, I'm more infatuated with the medium than ever. However, I haven't been to a theater since last February for some reason. The bulk of this renaissance happened in 2019, with one of the films I saw being Quentin Tarantino's Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. I don't have a prop for this one. It has been hours. Tarantino's ninth feature film is set in 1969, you guessed it, Hollywood, California, and stars Leonardo DiCaprio, Brad Pitt, and Margot Robbie. The bulk of the film follows DiCaprio's character, Rick Dalton, as he tries to adjust to the rapidly evolving film industry, and his stunt double Cliff Booth, played by Pitt, who has more or less been relegated to the position of Dalton's personal assistant. Along with being Tarantino's ninth film, it was also the final film for Luke Perry, who passed away in 2019 before the film was released. Not only was this Perry's final film, but it was the only one he did with his son, Jack Perry, better known as All Elite Wrestling's Jungle Boy, who worked as a PA and extra on the film. Also, I obviously don't have a nostalgic connection to this one-year-old movie that was set 30 years before I was born. I watched it during a time where I was going to the theaters more than ever. Will this movie's charm continue to stick with me when I'm no longer in a dark theater? Let's find out. We open on an ad for the fictional TV show Bounty Law, showing what Rick Dalton did in the prime of his career, before showing an interview where he and Cliff explained the importance of stunt doubles. One thing that hit me the second I saw this in theaters was the filming style of the interview. The camera seemed to be set up so that each shot looks like it's from someone's point of view. Whilst this may have been a style used back in the late 50s and early 60s, it makes the interviews seem less genuine, which I oddly enjoy in this setting. Cut to February of 1969, and we see our first bit of contrast between the lives of Sharon Tate, played by Margot Robbie, and Rick Dalton. Whilst Tate is very much in the height of her career and enjoying her lavish Hollywood lifestyle, Dalton seems a little more numb to the experience. We are then introduced to Marvin Schwartz, played by Al Pacino, and learn that due to Dalton's history of drunk driving, Cliff now has to drive him around everywhere. Schwartz tells Rick about the double feature him and his wife enjoyed, praising Dalton's work while sneaking in a cheeky Godfather reference. When discussing the films, we get a glimpse of the fictional World War II movie, The 14 Fists of McCluskey, which serves to parody films like Secret Invasion and Tarantino's own Inglourious Bastards. This also gives the gruesome visual of DiCaprio torching a group of Nazis with a flamethrower. A small, yet integral detail we get in this is that Dalton was actually trained to use a real flamethrower for that film.
Yeah, that's right. All right, that's too hot. Anything we can do about that heat?
Rick, it's a flamethrower.
Yeah.
The two of them go over the progression of Dalton's career and talk about how being fed to new stars will affect it going forward, diminishing his public reception. Rick and Cliff leave the restaurant, and we see Dalton start to break down about being a has-been, with his only option left being cast in Italian movies, a fate he sees as being worse than death. We get a glimpse of the hippies digging through the garbage and chanting together,
"All is one, all is one, all is one."
As much as I'd love to make a cult joke here, that was the main through line in my last video, and I'd rather not repeat myself. Also, it wouldn't be really much of a joke considering they're literally portraying the Manson family. Cliff drives back to Rick's house and they see the hippies crossing the street, showing the first example of the mutual intrigue between Cliff and Pussycat. Whilst whining about his career being in shambles, Dalton gets his first look at Sharon Tate and her husband, Roman Polanski. This instantly cheers him up, citing that Polanski could be instrumental in reviving Dalton's career. Anyway, Rick goes inside to practice his lines, whilst Cliff gets in his own, less glamorous car and drives home. One thing these following scenes do really well is illustrating the contrast between Rick and Cliff. Rick drives, or rather owns, a pristine-looking Cadillac. Cliff, on the other hand, owns a beat-up Volkswagen. Rick lives in a nice house in the Hollywood Hills. Cliff lives in a beat-up Airstream parked next to a drive-in movie theater. This not only shows a significant difference in income, but also hints that Cliff might be a little bit more frugal than his partner, whether that's by choice or consequence. Arriving home, Booth makes dinner for himself and his dog Brandy, showcasing her obedience with how well she waits to chow down. We cut to Rick making himself a drink and practicing lines for his shoot that takes place the following day. As he rehearses his lines, we see Tate and Polanski heading off to enjoy a night of partying over at the Playboy Mansion. We get a bit of exposition from Steve McQueen about Sharon's love life and how she left her fiancé Jay for her now husband Roman, and that the three of them are still inseparable. Starting off the next day, we have Cliff dropping a very hungover Rick off to set, and Rick asking him to do a few favors for him. He also tells Cliff he won't be needed on set because the casting director is best friends with someone from the Green Hornet. Next, we see Rick in a meeting with Sam Wanamaker, the director, talking over hair and makeup and all the changes to his appearance. This strikes a chord with Dalton as he feels that the changes will make him unrecognizable, to which the director says,
I don't want them to see Jake Cahill. I want them to see Caleb. I hired you to be an actor, Rick. Not a TV cowboy. You're better than that.
Cliff arrives at Rick's house and starts working on the antenna before thinking back to being on the set of the Green Hornet. On the set, Cliff is spotted outside Rick's trailer by the director Randy Miller, who immediately goes inside the trailer to confront Rick about his stunt double. Miller, after a series of excuses, states that he doesn't want Booth on set because of a rumor that he killed his wife and got away with it.
The dude killed his fucking wife.
Come on, man. You don't believe that old shit, do you?
Yes, Rick, I do.
We get a brief shot of the alleged incident with Cliff and his wife, Billy, on a boat, and her complaining about their situation, with the biggest point being that he's a loser. The scene ends with Billy getting up to confront Cliff, and Cliff holding what looks to be a harpoon gun, with his finger on the trigger. The movie never shows whether or not he actually killed his wife, leaving a bit of mystery to the whole situation. Rick convinces the director to let Cliff in. However, Cliff is warned to stay away from the director's wife, Janet. Up next, we have what is probably the most controversial scene in the movie, as Booth ends up in a fight with Bruce Lee. Both men get strong shots in, as Lee is able to knock Cliff down with a single kick. However, in the second round, Booth is able to throw his opponent right into a parked car. The controversy here stems from the fact they made Bruce Lee seem overly arrogant and that he was apparently a punching bag for Cliff. I can't personally speak on the controversy as I'm not close enough to Lee and his legacy. However, I do understand why his family might have been upset at this portrayal. As the two of them are deep into the third round, Janet comes in yelling at them for fighting, freaks out over what happened to her car, and kicks Cliff off the set.
What the fuck did you do to her car?
Well, I threw this little prick into it, but I did not know it was her car.
Get the wardrobe off, get your shit, and get fucked!
Back to Cliff working on Rick's antenna, and here he is, everybody! Here is the man of the hour. You know him. Ladies and gentlemen, give a warm welcome to Charles Manson. What the fuck is wrong with me? Manson pulls up in a beat-up old Twinkie's truck and waltzes up to Sharon's house without a care in the world. Charles asks Jay if he knows where the previous homeowner Terry is before wandering off. This is Manson's only appearance in the film, however the Manson family continues to have a strong presence throughout. After a brief conversation between Dalton and child actress Trudy, we go back over to Sharon Tate, who is picking up one of the hippies hitchhiking, whilst on her way to the cinema, without a care in the world. This again shows the strong contrast between her and Rick, but also gives a little more eerie foreshadowing, especially if you know what happened to Tate in real life. Next we see Dalton talking to the lead actor Jim Stacy about the pilot, and Jim ends up bringing up the Steve McQueen movie, The Great Escape, and a rumor that Rick was supposed to have McQueen's role. Whilst Rick outright denies that he was ever even contacted about the film, we end up seeing original footage with Rick superimposed over McQueen, suggesting that he at one point had an audition or even a screen test that went sour. Either that or I'm just imagining things and I'm turning into an English teacher. Once again back to Miss Tate, and she manages to get into a showing of The Wrecking Crew for free because she is in the movie. We see her watching the movie, and Jesus Christ, her feet have almost a full minute of screen time. For those of you who don't know, Tarantino has a foot fetish and will sometimes use his power as a director to see actresses' feet. We see it in its most egregious sense here. Also, there's a very blurry Jungle Boy in the background as an extra. Glad to see he got some screen time. Back over to Dalton, we see him in the pilot through the perspective of how the show would have presumably been edited. Everything in the show goes smoothly until he and the lead sit down for a drink, and Rick forgets his lines in a seamless transition from the show to reality. Or, well, the reality of the, you know what I mean. After the second line flub, Rick has a brief breakdown before regaining composure, finishing the scene, and promptly freaking out even harder. The freak out in the trailer is masterfully done, with Rick blaming the performance on alcohol, and in the end threatening to kill himself whilst looking into a mirror at just the right angle to where the reflection is looking at the God damn it, Quentin! I love this movie, but having a hard cut from DiCaprio essentially looking down the lens and threatening to kill himself to an extreme close-up of Margot Robbie's feet is jarring as hell and only appeals to a small niche of people. We see Tate in her feet watching herself in a fight scene, whilst also getting a glimpse of her training with Bruce Lee. Nice little touch. For the first time in a while, we circle back to Cliff driving through LA and, once again, meeting up with one of the hippies, Pussycat. She tells Cliff that she needs a ride to Spawn Movie Ranch, the very location where Bounty Law was filmed. This intrigues Cliff as he learns that her and her friends live there, and he agrees to bring her there. There's also some minor controversy here because of the provocative shots of Pussycat leaning over through the window, but because it wasn't too awfully egregious, this was ultimately ignored. And hey, at least it's not her— oh, come on! Anyway, He drives her to the ranch right before we see Rick getting ready for his next scene. This scene has Luke Perry in his last on-screen appearance, acting opposite Dalton in the pilot.
You do know kidnapping is a hanging offense.
So's blowing the heads off little girls. They can only hang me once.
In this scene, Dalton's character is negotiating a ransom for the little girl, threatening to kill her if he doesn't get his way. This scene went over way better for Rick, with Wanamaker praising his work and Trudy telling him,
"That was the best acting I've ever seen in my whole life."
Like you.
Rick fucking Dalton.
Back to Cliff as he shows up at the ranch with one of the hippies from the house watching him from the front doorway. Pussycat brings him through the ranch to meet Gypsy, with all the other hippies giving him dirty looks as he walks through.
And thank you for giving our precious Pussy a ride home.
Think nothing of it.
We love Pussy.
Yes, we do.
After Tex comes to look him over, Cliff starts asking about George Spahn, the owner of the ranch, and about how he's allowed all the hippies to stay there. Cliff starts heading over to the house to check on George, prompting Squeaky to kick everyone out. Cliff, passing a line of pissed off hippies, talks to Squeaky and convinces her to, reluctantly, let him come in and talk to George. Cliff comes in and wakes up George, now blind and seemingly having dementia, and tries to jog his memory and tell him who he is.
First you wake me up, and now you're pretending that I didn't tell you I was fucking blind! How am I gonna know what the hell color the head of the girl is that's with me all the time?
Oh, fair enough, George.
George thanks Cliff for visiting him before echoing Squeaky's statement that he needs to sleep so they can watch FBI together. Cliff tries to make sure that the hippies aren't taking advantage of George before he tells Cliff how much he cares for Squeaky. Cliff walks out through a sea of angry hippies, only to find a knife sticking out of one of Rick's tires. He finds the hippie responsible, tells him to fix it, and when he refuses, Cliff beats the hell out of him. With the threat of getting beaten more, he fixes the tires as all the hippies look on in horror and send for Tex. Tex, however, doesn't get back fast enough, and Cliff is able to get off scot-free. Cliff brings Rick home and comes in to watch Rick's episode of FBI with him. A delicious twist of irony that I just now noticed. Whilst watching the episode, Cliff tells Rick about an acid-dipped cigarette he bought off one of the hippies and stashes it there to smoke later. We see not only Cliff and Rick watching the episode, but also Marvin Schwartz. You hear Rick and Cliff commenting on the episode itself and how well Rick played his role.
I like that shot.
However, Schwartz is on the phone with the director of one of the Italian westerns he wanted Rick to be a part of, telling him to watch the episode of FBI, and that...
I'm watching your Nebraska gym as we speak.
Cut to 6 months later, and Rick and Cliff are on a plane back from Italy after shooting 4 Italian films. We get a light recap of the movies he was in, his thoughts about the Italian film style, his new Italian wife, and new 15 pounds. Due to Rick blowing most of his money when he was in Rome, him and Cliff ended up reaching the end of their partnership with those 4 films because Rick just couldn't afford them anymore. We see Rick and Cliff settling back into LA life, whilst also getting a recap of what Tate has been doing in that 6-month span, as Roman left to prepare for another movie and had 2 friends of his move in while he was gone. We get an almost painfully thorough description of everyone's night, as both groups go on separate nights out, and eventually everyone gets back to their homes. As Rick drunkenly goes to make frozen margaritas, Cliff takes Brandy out for a walk while smoking the now 6-month-old acid-dipped cigarette. And here's where we get into the revisionist history portion of the film, as we see a group of hippies driving up in a beat-up old taxi ready to kill Sharon Tate and everyone else in the home with her. In real life, the killers succeeded, stabbing all but one of them to death and writing pig on the front door using Tate's own blood. Members of the Manson family were arrested in September of that year on unrelated charges that eventually led to the LAPD uncovering the true reason behind Tate's murder. Tate and the others staying in the home were killed not because of who they were, but rather where they were, as the house was previously rented to the previously mentioned Terry Melcher, a friend of Manson's. In the film, however, as the hippies, led by Tex, are out discussing their plan to kill Tate and the others, Rick hears their loud exhaust and proceeds to chew them out for bringing their car onto the private road, causing them to drive back down and plan to kill him instead.
Was that Rick Dalton? Who? The guy from Bounty Law.
Who, Jake Cahill?
Yeah, that guy in the road was Jake Cahill.
The four of them plan to kill Dalton after recognizing him as Jake Cahill from Bounty Law, deciding that they wanted to kill the man who taught them to kill.
Every show on TV that was an I Love Lucy was about murder. So, my idea is, we kill the people who taught us to kill.
The scene is really powerful in its showing how deranged the members of the Manson family really were, and how Charles warped their minds. One exception to the rule was Flower Child, whose real-life counterpart, Linda Kasabian, was actually the key witness in the Manson murder trials, as she was there for the actual murders, but did not participate. In the film, as they are walking back up to kill Dalton, Flower Child lies and tells them that she left her knife in the car, takes the keys to go and get it, but instead drives off, leaving the others stranded. The remaining family members arrive shortly after Brandy and a mid-acid trip Cliff, as Cliff begins to make food for Brandy, whilst Rick relaxes in his pool. The three family members storm in, brandishing knives and a gun, as they prepare to kill everyone there.
You are real, right?
I'm as real as a donut, motherfucker.
Brad Pitt acting as if he's on acid in this scene is just absolutely beautiful. Anyway, they drag Rick's new wife Francesca out to the living room just before Cliff begins to recognize the three of them from Spawn Ranch. The mixed tag team of Cliff, Brandy, and Francesca proceed to clean house and absolutely brutalize the family members. The only injury sustained by the protagonist was a knife buried deep into Cliff's hip. However, he is numbed by the acid trip and is able to get his payback. One of the girls is able to get Tex's gun and, while shooting into the air, breaks through the sliding glass door, falls into the pool, and startles Rick. What follows is one of my favorite sequences from a movie ever, as Rick goes into his shed, brings out the flamethrower from the 14 Fists of McCluskey, and proceeds to burn her to death. Now, I'm not 100% sure what the desired reaction was, but when I saw this in theaters, I laughed harder than I have at any other movie. I was wheezing after I saw this. Shortly after that, we have Rick, Cliff, and Francesca talking to the police about what happened before the paramedics take Cliff to the hospital for his stab wound. After Rick and Cliff say goodbye, we close out the movie with Rick relaying the story to Jay and coming up to the house for a drink with Sharon and the others. I love this movie. I love the setting. I love the story. I love everything. Well, almost everything. As I stated, the feet shown in the film is a little egregious at times. Whilst the majority of them I wouldn't bat an eye at if I didn't know about Tarantino's fetish, scenes with Sharon Tate in theater and Pussycat smushing hers up against the windshield are just so in your face and just hard to ignore. that minor gripe out of the way, I love the way the story is told, the performance of the actors, especially DiCaprio acting as an actor, playing a different character, and messing up. Just the overall portrayal of the characters. I just love it. When watching this film, you really get a sense of these characters, whether it's the happy-go-lucky Tate, the actor afraid of being washed up that is Dalton, and just the entirety of the Manson family, really. One Easter egg I noticed while doing research was all of the VW Beetles and converted Dune Buckies at Spawn Ranch. This alludes to the original Manson family arrest, as they were taken in for stealing Beetles and turning them into the buggies. It's the little details like those that I just absolutely love seeing in film, and they just really make movies like this for me. Anyways, thanks for watching. Make sure once again to subscribe to the channel. Follow me on all of my social media. And take care.